Hello and welcome to this next edition of Empathy at the Table. What an exciting show we have in store for you today. Today, I'm speaking with David Noguera, who was the president of Doctors Without Borders from 2016 to 2021. He's had over 20 years experience working with the Doctors Without Borders. He has some very interesting views, both political and also environmental views on how you can actually engage with people who completely disagree with your perspectives, but have a common goal. It's going to be a really interesting conversation, and there will be some ups and downs, and I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into this conversation. So join us with our next podcast, Empathy at the Table, with David Noguera. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. David, you are the president, or you were the president of Doctors Without Borders from 2016 to 2021. Well over 20 years experience in working for the same organization. Would you put some meat on the bones and tell our listeners a bit more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm a doctor by training and a father of two. And as you mentioned, back in 2001, I started my humanitarian career. So basically, I spent 10 years in the field working in different emergency situations. So conflict, nutritional crisis, outbreaks, natural disasters. Then I joined the headquarters of MSF Spain in Barcelona as head of the emergency unit. And then, as you mentioned, my last formal job in the organization was being the president of MSF Spain, Doctors Without Borders Spain, and member of the international board. So by being president of MSF Spain, you're also a member of the international board, so you're overseeing the whole organization. And I stopped that title because this job's limited in time. You can do a maximum of 6 years. So after that, now for the last 2 years, well, I'm doing a number of things, but basically back to the field. I mean, I just was in Ukraine last month. So yeah.
Wow. Did I read somewhere that there were over 6,000 people in the organization?
Yeah, that's for MSF Spain. So that was under my direct responsibility was between 6,000 and 6,500, depending on the emergencies, because
Wow.
I mean, depending on the humanitarian volume. Yeah, so it's a large organization. If you take that to the MSF International, we're talking about around 50,000. So yes, it's a big organization. Yeah,
Wow.
6,000, 6,500 is a lot. It's a lot of people.
So, I mean, let's get this so we get this into perspective. You were running an organization of over 6,000 people, and the environment in which you were running this organization was conflict and crisis. So you were basically facing conflict and crisis on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, it was not me. I mean, a group of people managing the organization. But yeah, I mean, and this is one of our mottos. I mean, whenever there was a kind of, let's say, internal crisis, I was always saying the same thing. I mean, crisis is a natural environment. I mean, so I mean, crisis in MSF, what that mean? I mean, because as you said, I mean, we jump from crisis to crisis. I mean, we always, facing this kind of situations. When I teach in some business schools, and sometimes they put as an example of highly performant teams, the military, because but militaries, they have times in peace, as no, militaries, they go to war and then they go back, and and they face times of peace where they prepare for conflict. Yeah. For us, it's crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis, because unfortunately, I mean, how, and everybody knows how it is. So there's so many things going on at the same time, and that's where we operate. That's a natural environment. That's where we have channeled, the organization, where we are good at, where we look for good capacities working in that specific those situations. So yeah, it's a natural habitat. Yeah.
So you mentioned about internal crisis, right? So do you find sometimes that the environment of external crisis does that heighten the possibility of internal crisis, or is it the actual opposite?
I mean, it's a good question. I think I mean, there's a specific type of people that like this kind of job. Let's talk about regular medicine. You have GPs, and then there's people who enjoy emergency rooms. So there's some appetite for people that enjoy and thrive working, under stressful situations, under tough situations, because there's big challenges, and some people enjoy, facing this difficult situations, having to make fast decision making in a very agile way, etc., etc., etc. On the other hand, is people that are very militant and very committed to this kind of job, and therefore they're very committed to the organization. So these people are activists, which is fantastic, because they always go the extra mile when it comes to the job, but they always go the extra mile when it comes to internal issues. They're really committed.
Right.
So they really feel the organization as something that is part of them. So yes, somehow I would say it feeds. Working in this crisis situation also feeds the internal dynamics of the organization. I think it would be impossible to split those in two, as they were separate things. No, it's the same thing. When I had interviews and people ask me how I separate my personal life from my professional life, my answer is always the same. I don't. It's the same thing for me. This job is part of my life, and my life is doing this job, of course, with other things, family, friends, etc., etc. But they're so intricate together, that it's very difficult to differentiate.
When you, I heard you describe the Doctors Without Borders as a medical and humanitarian organization. Do you separate the two? You're a doctor and a humanitarian. Can you be both? Can you be one or the other? How do you kind of blend those two?
Right. I don't want to go theoretical on this, but humanitarian is understood for the general public as something that is good, right? But it's not the same thing. It's not the same concept, right? There's some good things that are not humanitarian. So humanitarian, in my sector, humanitarian is understood when you work as an organization in a situation and you're completely independent and you're completely neutral and you're completely impartial. So you have to follow those principles to be humanitarian, right? For instance, governments, they do good things, but for instance, sometimes the military, they engage in humanitarian crisis, right? But they don't do that in an independent way. They're tasked, and sometimes they have a political agenda. So that can still be good, but it's not humanitarian. When you have a political agenda, we do not call that humanitarian anymore, right? So just for clarify why I use the term humanitarian. So I use it in a technical way. But as I said, people understand the term as humanitarian being a good thing, right? So fair enough. But and medical, because we do some specific technical job. We don't build up schools, for instance, that are very important, but there's other people that know how to do that much better than us. So when we say we're medical and humanitarian, that's the nature of the organization. But of course, again, the two concepts that for me, as I understand medicine, they completely overlap, because for me, medicine is about treating people in an independent, impartial, and neutral manner. So we somehow, all medical staff, we are obliged to treat anyone, even if we had, someone that went into the emergency room that was a terrorist that just executed 25 people, on the street. You still have to treat that person, So they completely, as I understand medicine, and I have to say, is generally understood. Medical staff, they have a duty to treat anyone, regardless of any other consideration. So they're completely intertwined, these two concepts.
Yeah, this brings me on to a thought. This whole podcast, this whole idea is about how do we use emotional intelligence to negotiate with other people, and oftentimes when we're negotiating with other people, it's because we see things differently. We have a differing maybe interests or different perspectives, and then we want to provide an emotionally intelligent framework to have these conversations. So when you're going into a crisis situation, how do you create the stakeholder map to decide who you're going to talk to and how you're going to engage?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really appreciate what you're doing here, Tony, because yes, we have to negotiate, and we negotiate with extremely harsh people. In my 20 plus years of career, I've engaged with, people who are accused of genocide, people who are accused of using rape as a weapon of war, people who are guilty of killing thousands, so, and you're forced to sit with these people and talk, because why? Because you're trying to gain access, basically, right? You're trying to reach people that suffer the most. And, most of the times our presence is not comfortable, because somehow we are doctors, but we are witnessing things, right? So when people have a criminal agenda, the last thing you want is witness around. So this is one of our major challenges. So we really have to, and we train people on how to negotiate and how to engage this kind of actors. So how can we push our agenda, and what are the red lines? When you engage in this kind of conversations. These are really, really tough conversations, and they're full of contradictions. Because I think everyone can understand that. So yes, it's something we have to do, and we do it along two ways, basically. One, let's be clear, and it's more complex, but for the sake of time, is a trade-off, is a kind of business thing, if you wish. I mean, if I access your population, you can also say that you're a good leader and that you're trying to support your people, by allowing NGOs to come and build hospitals. So they use that politically, and that's part of the game, I mean, and you have to understand that. But then is very linked to emotions. I mean, you have to talk about humanity. I mean, you have people suffering, so you have to be able to convince people that whatever the good or bad reasons for a conflict or whatever, there's children malnourished, and you want to access them and treat them. So you're looking for that line of humanity that will allow you to connect with this kind of people, and make them understand that treating a malnourished child is something that is radically good and should be preserved out of the equation of any other consideration, right? So yeah, we have to. So it goes both ways. It's a very pragmatic, realistic, business-oriented politics, hard politics, win-win, trade-off, whatever. And then there's another line about appealing to these emotions, to this humanity, in order to gain access to populations that are suffering and they're not responsible at all for all the situation that's happening around them.
It's incredible. So I'd like to pluck some more fruit off this tree. This is really exciting for me. So you're in a situation, you have managed to make your way through various channels, and you're sitting in front of somebody who's agreed to see you, who has committed some real atrocities. Walk me through what that conversation looks like, how you engage, and what goes on in your mind. What's going on in that? I mean, is it a room full of different people? Is it just you and that person? What does the setup look like?
Depends. I mean, it's one of the things that happen in a life that you commit to humanitarian. I mean, people don't know this, but I met in Copenhagen, in Denmark, in a room with people accused of terrorism international, and I had to take a plane and fly to Copenhagen. And I'm a doctor from Girona, which is a small town, and suddenly I'm in Copenhagen. So, it's not that there's a specific training on doing this, I mean, somehow you have a feeling of what am I doing here, right? But, at that time I was responsible for operations for a specific country. I'm going to spare the details, but, and I had to meet these people because they were threatening our operations and therefore were threatening our staff there. So, and then you will go to the other extreme, you have the leaders that they want to make this very public, and then you go to this place and you have all the honors and it goes on the media, on Twitter, and they use it politically. They say, we're meeting with MSF because, we are. Right. So you have to be, I mean, there's massive risk of manipulation, so you have to be extremely careful. And then you have to understand that there's a lot of things that you're not going to be able to control. It's out of your hands. I mean, you're going to their playground. I mean, they are the ones, that are familiar with the place you're meeting, the situation. So it's not that easy. But basically, I think you have to be very much aware, and I think this is one of the key successes of MSF. I mean, this organization, 50 years old, Nobel Prize, you name it. I mean, global brand. What we are very clear is our objective. We want to save lives, and that's not negotiable. externally or internally. I mean, there's this massive coherence within this organization about the objective of the whole organization itself: saving lives. And saving lives, people in the most critical situation. That's what we do, right? So this is what you have at the center of your, and then indeed you have some red lines. I mean, you're not going to bribe people, I mean, but then if you have this very clear, then there's room for, for maneuvering.
Right.
And you have to understand, I mean, it's impossible to get into something as dirty as a conflict and come out clean. I mean, it's impossible. So you have to assume there's going to be some contradictions, some manipulation, some propaganda. You have to understand that it's part of the game. If not, you're going to just be able to operate, in Sweden where nothing happens, and it's something, everything is perfect. In conflict, no. So it's about the objective and understanding the level of contradiction and the level of manipulation that you are ready to assume, But indeed, there's some red lines. So this, I think, I would say it would be the kind of general framework you have to operate within.
And so you obviously have to put a lot of preparation in before you go into the negotiation. How do you prepare yourself emotionally when you're going into these type of situations?
I mean, it's not that we have, and I think we should invest more in doing this, because I mean we have arrived late as an organization, I'm saying, to really monitor and understand and manage the emotional impact that a job has on us. I come from a generation 25 years ago, we were tough guys, we went to these places and we saw whatever, and you just swallow it because it's part of the business, and we all smoked and drank, and there was this kind of cowboy culture.
Right.
I remember those days that are luckily over, they're gone, and now we do take much care of people from a psychological perspective and preparing people for the kind of situations. And we go through tough situations, talking to these people and then seeing the consequences of what these people do. I mean, it's tough. It's tough, Tony, to work in malnutrition. It's very tough. I mean, you see children die, It's tough to work, in a war conflict. I mean, I haven't been to Gaza, but what my colleagues are reporting is terrible. I think it's very important to understand in this kind of situation and to prepare yourselves, what are you responsible for and what not? I mean, you go there as a humanitarian worker to save lives. You have nothing to do with the conflict. Everything happening around you is not your fault. There's other people responsible for that. And that is fundamental. Because if not, you're simply not going to be able to operate, because it's completely overwhelming. I mean, you're sitting there, you come from a privileged situation like me, I mean, I'm from the area of Barcelona. I live all my life here. So, I mean, zero conflicts, nothing, nice country. I mean, beautiful country, nice people, everything kind of just works, and suddenly you're in the middle, you're in Mogadishu or Central African Republic, and nothing is like this. It's completely different environment. It's a different planet, right? You're not responsible for that. And this is very important, because if not, it's going to be completely overwhelming. On the contrary, I mean, what you're doing, saving lives, is radically good. I mean, saving lives of people in these kind of situations, for instance, saving lives of malnourished children, is one of the few consensus we have left in this polarized society, Tony. I mean, I mean, people, for instance, you talk about migration, and you have pro-migration and anti-migration, and people with very strong positions, anti-migration, saying, no, let them die in the Mediterranean Sea. I don't care. And these people are sitting, in parliaments, But, if we had held a meeting with 1,000 people and we ask a question, I mean, should we treat a malnourished child in Yemen, 2-year-old, and give him some food, yes or no? There's a consensus. I mean, everyone would say yes. If not, that person is a psychopath, I mean, it's a different category. It has to go to a psychiatrist, right? So we are very much aware that what we do is radically good. So understanding what is your responsibility, you're not responsible for the situation, and understanding that what you're doing is radically good is the two big elements of this framework. Because, Tony, nothing can prepare you to go tomorrow, you and me, if we went to Gaza and I have 20 plus, even or being in Ukraine, I mean, I still face situations that I don't understand, Tony, because it's impossible to understand. And in these complex situations, in this kind of context where everything has fallen apart, it's very important to understand also that you have to be able to operate without knowing or without knowing the answers, because there's all these questions around and it's impossible to answer. Why is this happening? Why this has no sense? So you're operating in a situation that you don't understand, and it's full of questions that you have no answer for. So you have to focus clearly on your objective, because your objective is radically good. So that, I think that's the core elements of all these equations.
I like what you said about this common interest around radically good, right? And then building the image of children, because both sides of the negotiation have something that they can kind of hold on to, right? Nobody wants a situation where innocent children are dying. So I think that gives a good, strong basis for a negotiation, and then you can start to talk about things around that. I remember speaking to one of a leadership coach called Jerry Colonna, and he said something really interesting. I was asking him, why do you do all this stuff, right? What's the reason behind it? Why do people do the things that you do, for example, David? And he said, well, imagine living in a world where people just did nothing at all. What would that look like? And so when you kind of wake up in the morning and you're in your nice Girona, everything's beautiful, the sun's shining, the mountains there, you're having your tapas. What is it inside you that makes you decide, hey, I'm just going to, strip down, I'm going to put on my rough clothes and I'm heading straight into conflict?
Yeah, well, I can absolutely relate to the sentence you just used, but I maybe phrase it in I use it to maybe phrase it in different words, because sometimes the alternative of not going is not an option. What is this crazy world, that we have a conflict in Ukraine and we're not going to take care of people that are our neighbors, what is the alternative? Not going, not doing nothing, just watching on TV, on Twitter. What's where are we heading as a society? If a very important part of our job, Tony, is going there, because these people, they are there and they have the sense or the certainty that they've been forgotten. So having someone that jumps on a plane, travels 5, 6, 10,000 kilometers to be next to these people is very important. Is a bridge of humanity, and that already makes an impact. Even if you're just there, because they say, okay, we're not alone, we're not completely forgotten. There's people who care. So, as I said, I'm certain that what we do is radically good. So I have no doubts about that. And having no doubts about something is really reassuring, it's really fulfilling.
Yeah.
And then let me be very honest. I love my job. And humanitarians, we have this reputation, which is nice. People say, oh, David, you leave everything behind, you sacrifice all of your life. Well, that's not true at all. I'm turning 50 in 2 months, Tony, and I'm still going. I'm an adult. I make my own choices, and I love what I do, So I'm not renouncing to anything. Of course, it has trades-off, but your job, like any job, and any lifestyle you choose, or any, there's some trade-offs. Of course, I don't see my children that much, or I don't know. Well, but still, I love my job. I love it because it has allowed me, when I hear these people or people, who coach about professional fulfillment, I know exactly what that is, Tony. I know exactly. I'm an expert on that. I wake up every morning saying, if I was 27 again, I would do exactly the same thing. So I'm totally familiar with that feeling. And then, so no, it's not that humanitarians will leave everything behind and we go to some place. And I'm certain of my privileged position that working 20 plus years in the humanitarian world has not made me a better person than you or than anyone else. But it's given me certainly a different perspective of the world.
Yeah.
When I coach in, in the ESN, in these places, I was last summer. I was in the CEO world CEO training with 40 CEOs global top training in the world, and I was telling them, you guys, you've been to London, Paris, Tokyo, Rome, Los Angeles, New York, Barcelona, Madrid, and whatever. The places I've been, none of you have been there. Because I go to extreme places. I see extreme realities, Tony. So that's given me a completely different perspective of the world to the people around me, So what makes me do this? There's a general objective, is good, is necessary. The alternative of not going is simply not an option. And from a personal and professional perspective, the best job in the world. With a contradiction that we all love this job, but we would all love to be, to disappear tomorrow, MSL.
Because be unemployed, right?
So again, but this level of contradiction is this is live, and when you go to extreme situations, the contradictions are even higher than in regular life.
Yeah. So let's talk about empathy, the role empathy plays, because actually, what I'm hearing, everything you're saying is around empathy. It's around really trying to work to understand the other person, to see the world through their eyes. But you actually, in your first 3 years, you went to Congo, Darfur, Ivory Coast, Somalia. So you went to all these places, not because you wanted to read on Twitter or hear. You actually went and looked these people in the eye. And I'd like you to, if you could open up and share how those experiences and being able to see other people suffering and see other people, how that made you change over the years from being a tough, smoking, drinking cowboy, come on, we're men. How has that kind of evolved you into the person you are today?
Empathy, emotions. My job is very emotional, and the moment I think that this is the moment you stop feeling emotional about it is the time to leave. I'm not yet there. I still get emotional, when we're talking about these things. Who knows? But still. So one of the strongest things, as you just said, is meeting these people, right? I will be cautious about talking with empathy with these people because, as I said, I come from a very privileged position. So I don't know what it is, to be a mom in Congo with 5 child that has lost 2 to conflict and 1 to nutrition, and she's been raped. But at the end of the day, we can empathize in terms of suffering. We all suffer, different levels, different. So you can empathize in terms of the feelings, of the emotions. And I can tell you, and this, of course, this is going to sound obvious, but we are in crazy times now in the Western world, or whatever we call it, or the developed world, or whatever you want to call it. But the suffering of a mom losing a kid in Congo is exactly the same of a mom suffering a kid in Barcelona. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
So. Again, it comes without saying, but people here, some people seem not to understand that, it's exactly the same suffering. On the other hand, and because I had a long career in humanitarian and I enjoyed this position of visibility, of being present, so you get to meet celebrities and very, very important people. None of these important people have impressed me as much as the people, I was in Niger 3 years ago, Tony, and I met this Mahmoud, this guy on his 50s. He was a kind of elder and leader of a group of people, right, of a community. And he was traveling through the desert for 3 weeks, escaping the violence of Boko Haram, the story he told me, it was Netflix, Tony. I'm telling you, you're sitting there and you and you are, you jump on a plane and you're there and people think you're risking your life. And in front of you, there's this guy telling you this story, how he saved 200 people, walking at night, doing 3 weeks to avoid being assassinated by this fundamentals. And you're sitting there like, man, I need to take a selfie with you. You know what I mean? Because so these extreme situations put you in contact with people that have suffered a lot, and some of them are destroyed. Tony, and they need help just to stand up, to put them up again. On the other hand, you face this huge amount of people, resilient, committed, that they relentlessly, because in conflict, Tony, I mean, the most brave thing is choose not to fight. That's when people show true bravery, and they care about the fellow citizens and all that. So get these human stories. I mean, you tell me. I mean, it's like. I mean, you cannot believe the stories. So I've never been very impressed with all. I mean, wonderful people, but with all these celebrities and famous or wealthy people around me, because my I was comparing with people that for me are absolutely incredible. So I've been very privileged in that sense of having hundreds of stories, amazing stories of people surviving. The most challenging situations we can think of. Incredible.
I know we are coming to the end, but I've got so many more questions, so I'll just reduce it to two questions. The first question is, can you tell us the difference between negotiating with somebody who is a known criminal, somebody who's committed war crimes, and you're negotiating with them for you to do your work, versus negotiating with politicians and people in power who you're negotiating with to open their borders to allow some of these people to come in?
It's going to sound tough, but there's not so many. Unfortunately, I mean, I have to say, sometimes I met politicians that really they cared about their people, and then it was very easy, very easy. And even if they acknowledge that will be harmful for the political career, I mean, there's one country in the world that for the last 5 years has had no cholera cases. Cholera is a disease, where people lose fluids, vomit, diarrhea, and all that, and it's related to poor water quality, right?
Right.
So this government, whatever, it's not 5 years ago, decided there's no cholera cases anymore. So and now they call it acute watery diarrhea. So they went from having thousands of cases per year, and then from January 2018 or 19, I don't recall, 0 cases. Because politically speaking, it's not nice.
Right.
I mean, I could come here and tell a naive story that, us humans, we all come together, we hold hands in front of the situation, and we try to support each other. That's not how the world works.
Yeah.
So sometimes politicians are part of the problem, sometimes are part of the solution.
Yeah.
My experience, mostly part of the problem, sometimes part of the solution. So it's a political discussion. So you have to understand the game you're playing. Because as I said, somehow if you are managing a city or country and you have an organization building cholera hospitals in your place, people will tell you, well, I mean, is the government cannot manage. They need people from outside because they're not capable to manage the situation, and the opposition will use that against the ruling party. So it gets humanitarian aid, and humanitarian crisis, politically speaking, are a bad business. And we saw this in COVID in Spain and COVID across the world. I mean, you saw COVID in UK. How polarized. So et cetera, et cetera. So you're trying to help, and you're getting into these situations. But at the end of the day, that with politicians, there's some red lines. When it goes to the extreme negotiations, I mean, you have to be very careful because security is at stake.
Yeah.
Your personal security, which is a problem, and the organizational security, which is also a problem. So you have to be extremely careful. But but still, I mean, I think that the good thing is that we managed, Tony. We managed to get there. So this, I'm strong. I've used strong words talking about trading off and realpolitik and manipulation, but humanity and empathy still at the core of the discussion. So I mean, is a super strong argument to sit with people, and you have to keep going, and we are able to operate in the most challenging context across
Yeah.
the world. We have presence in Somalia, in Congo, in Yemen, you name it. These are all these dictatorships, warlords, and we still have access because this element of empathy and humanity, I mean, is still a strong thing. It's contaminated by the whole, the whole environment, but still is a strong, very strong argument.
There was one quote that you made. I saw a video where you were talking to, I think at the beginning of COVID, you were talking to a group of gamers, and you were talking about mission and how important it is that we don't lock our doors, right? We don't go into our rooms and lock our doors and just stay in the room and hope the problem goes away. And you quoted an author called Salamago, and you said there are two superpowers. One is either like US or China, and the other one is us, right? Ourselves. Do you still think that's the case?
I'm certain. I'm absolutely certain. I mean, the first humanitarian responder in any crisis is the population. I mean, what Ukrainians are doing to keep the country together, to keep society, is amazing. Forget about MSF. Forget about David Noguera going there. Forget about this. I mean, what they're doing when COVID struck, if people wouldn't have behaved in a responsible manner, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of examples of solidarity that don't get into Twitter, because in Twitter we see the imbecile doing nonsense, and this goes viral. But neighbors caring about neighbors, family caring about family. I mean, what hold together society is doing is people, So I see it's like ecologism, In ecology now we all have a role to play, right? I mean, okay, you have Greenpeace, right, and they are the front, and you have Greta Thunberg, and it's fantastic. But without people doing their job, which is recycling and putting pressure on companies and on governments to push the green agenda, Greenpeace or Greta Thunberg have nothing to do. I'm very envious of that situation because the humanitarians, we haven't been able to achieve this level of implementation, The humanitarians were still the crazy MSF guys that will go to these places and maybe people give some money. No, we need people doing more than that, finding their own ways because, humanitarian crises like climate change, the causes and the consequences are global. So we need people engaging and pushing companies and pushing governments to change things, right? So I think that everyone has to find their role in in this chain of humanity, right?
Yeah.
And it's full of contradictions. I mean, we all eco-friendly, but sometimes we take a plane, we go to Mallorca for holidays, and we produce some carbon print. Well, yeah, there's a level of contradiction, but we still have a role to play. So it's absolutely fundamental that individuals engage. How is each individual person to decide that? But certainly, I think there's a lot of reward in engaging in this kind of common and global causes. I mean, I think, as I said, I think ecologism is the best example. It's true, and I know that we're not going in the best direction, whatever. But if we are going to solve this problem, it's because people are committed to this problem. Each and every individual that is committed to it. So the power is still in the hands of people. Some individuals have too much power, but that's a different podcast. But yeah, absolutely, I believe in strongly. And when people are taken to a critical situation, believe me, I mean, I was just in Kharkiv with the Ukrainian NGO. One guy, Tony, 33 years old, a mathematician. He's now delivering oncological treatment to 2,000 patients. He's already moved $20 million of drugs. This guy, one guy. So it's amazing what people, absolutely amazing.
I mean, I love how you honestly speak about the contradictions that exist, within this arena, because it is full of contradictions. I remember when you and I first met, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, one of the things you said that really impressed me, because I was challenging you on the role of NGOs, and I think I said to you, some NGOs actually cause more problems than they solve. And you honestly looked at me in the face and said, in many cases, the best thing that we can do as international governments is get out and leave these countries to solve the problems, because most of the problems they're facing were ones that were caused by these international companies anyway and countries.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because contradictions happen at all this level, and if you want to operate in perfect laboratory conditions, then you have to become a scientist, and then you control temperature and you control humidity and you control everything. But in the real world and in crisis, there's nothing to control. I mean, it's complete chaos. So you know, and yeah, and sometimes, you know, of course, everybody, all actors in principle engage in a situation to do good and to have a positive impact. And sometimes it doesn't happen.
Mm.
And you have to understand that. And there's moments that you have to say, look, you know, enough is enough. Of course, I have to separate, you know, because this is an important thing also. I mean, you know, I feel very comfortable being a humanitarian because our formula is very simple. I mean, if you ask me, David, how would you solve problems in the world? I said, I have no clue, Tony. That's for politicians.
Yeah.
And I never ran for president of Spain. I was president of MSF Spain.
Yeah.
If I knew how to solve the world, I would run for president of Spain. You know, my suspicion is that the people that run for president, even if they tell us they know, they don't know how to solve the world. But that's a different question. So it's, let's say, being a humanitarian is easy. We have a very clear objective, which is saving lives, alleviating suffering, and restoring dignity. We engage in a crisis situation and we try to save lives. When the crisis is over, we leave. So we kind of we do rescue things, right? But there's no crisis in the world, none, that if you start, that is local crisis, no. I mean, there's always companies involved, there's always governments involved, there's all international organizations, regional agendas, etc., etc., etc. So sometimes, yeah, I think that the best solution for some countries would be to leave them alone, you know, to not interfere.
Yeah.
Because, you know, but because some countries or some critical contexts where we operate, I mean, they never enjoyed, you know, a period where they didn't have all this interest and agendas.
Yeah.
That's, you know, messing up the whole situation, you know. But as I said, I don't know how to solve the world. If I knew, I would run for president of, you know, Spain, but that's not happening. So well,
I think you're doing a fantastic job right where you are. The North Star that you have, I think it's like a badge you wear, doing, you know, radically good stuff, right? And that's something you can wake up in the morning and you can quantify that by what you're doing. So, you know, I think one of my big takeaways from this conversation is being really clear about why you're going into the negotiation, accepting that there will be contradictions, accepting that it won't always go your way and you might not always get exactly what you want, but focusing on that area and having a common interest in what radically good actually looks like, I think is a really good focus.
Yeah. Yeah, because it does create a human connection, and believe it or not,
yeah,
I sat at tables with really bad people, and there was some level of, you know, empathy between us. So, you know, we could talk each other. So, which is a very contradictory thing, if you wish, but because at the center of the table there was this radically good thing, and I think that is the key to some of these discussions, as I mentioned before. Yeah.
David, unfortunately for our listeners, not for you and I, because I'm definitely going to meet with you for lunch, a coffee, a beer, whatever.
Looking forward.
We come to the end of our podcast. For people who want to know more about you and know about your work, what is it that you're working on at the moment? I know you're kind of coming to the end of your tenure right now. So what does the next David look like, and how can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I needed to take a break after all this extensive period because, I mean, my end of term was COVID, and then we suffered the killing of 3 of our colleagues. One of them I happen to know, they were killed in Ethiopia, they were assassinated in Ethiopia. So it was a tough, very, very tough ending. And so I took a break. Now I'm back in the field because that's what I love. I mean, you know, although it's challenging because I remember when I was 27 or 30, you know, I was driving the Toyota and jumping out of the Toyota. I was in Zambia some months ago, you know, and after driving the Toyota for 2 hours, I needed some 20 minutes just to put all my, skeleton back together, So I'm not the young guy anymore, but I'm still going back to the field, trying to support teams, bringing my experience to. So, and that I love. I'm doing training in humanitarian field. That's why I feel comfortable training. And then I'm doing, but I don't call that training because I'm comfortable training humanitarian response because that's my technical expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Then what I'm doing is sharing, like with you, Tony. I'm sharing at business schools, at ESA, Instituto de Empresa, IADA, you name it. I'm working with companies and executives on this kind of topic, sharing experience about how to manage pressure, or talking out organizations with purpose, because of course MSF is one of the brands when it comes to this. And also I'm working in something very interesting. I started a company some years ago. I'm still working with them where we do team buildings and events, for companies. It's called La Cooperativa Humanitaria. If people are interested, they can Google that. And we do team buildings for companies that we bring together this team dynamics, also with the purpose, with the message, trying to sensitize people on this kind of situations. If people want to reach me, I'm available on LinkedIn. If you Google David Noguera MSF, I think there's a number of references. So I'm quite easy to find if people are looking for me.
Thank you. David, thank you so much for joining us at Empathy at the Table. And we will put all of the show notes in the below so people will be able to contact you. And thank you very much again for joining us.
Thanks to you and congratulations on what you're doing. I think it's really useful and very interesting.
Wow, that was a real humdinger of a conversation. Thank you very much, David Noguera, for joining us at Empathy at the Table. If you want to follow David, all the details will be in the show notes, so be sure to follow him, connect with him. He's a fantastic guy, very open, very authentic, and with a lot more information to share. If you like this show or you've enjoyed some of the details that we've talked about, please be sure to subscribe either on our YouTube tune or on your usual platforms for podcasting. You'll find us on Apple and you'll also find us on Spotify. Thank you once again for joining us and see you on the next episode of Empathy at the Table.